And we're in. How you doing today, Philip?
I'm doing fantastic. It's nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's strange because like you expect to have some familiarity with someone before you come on their podcast, but then it's just like it's like speed dating.
Yeah. I've never done that. I mean, I've been with my wife since I was 19, so I wouldn't know what that would be like.
I think we're all better off that that's in the past.
But
Yeah.
it's nice because you don't this is like shotgun wedding. You just get to know somebody right away.
Yeah, and it's hard because you never really know like where to start off with someone. Like, God forbid you insult someone right off the bat, and then you have to do like 90 more minutes with them or something.
Starts off very awkward. Well, I'm
Yeah.
sure we'll loosen up and yeah, ask me whatever. I'm excited to chat.
Well, look, I love chatting with people who are in the creative fields, and I love
Yeah.
talking with people who actually make stuff. And you're a creator, and you've been producing and writing and directing and all the good stuff. So we'll get into that. But I think the best place to always start off is like where you're from.
Yeah, I'm actually surprisingly from California, Southern California. I listened to a couple other podcasts, and pretty much no one's from there, and it's true. I've been here in Los Angeles since after I graduated from UC Santa Barbara, so I've been here for almost 20 years. But I I grew up in Costa Mesa, and then when my dad was a contractor, my mom was a stay-at-home housewife, and they couldn't afford to live in Orange County, so they decided to move inland, which a lot of people did at the time, like the early 90s, and they moved to the Temecula area.
Okay.
And so I grew up in the suburbs out there and all that, and
Hmm.
had a very fun childhood. And there was like no rules. We could do whatever we wanted, skateboard, fish, wakeboard, snowboard, all that stuff. But we were still close enough to Orange County and the other places in Southern California to enjoy all the things that it had to offer. And I went to high school. And after I got out of high school, I really wanted to go to USC. But a girl I fell in love with went to UC Santa Barbara, and I decided to follow her up there. And I went to school there. And after that, Los Angeles. So
Wow. What a journey. No, it's
a lot at you.
yeah, no, it's true. Like most of the people I talk to on the podcast like aren't from Southern California, like they've never been here. And it's always kind of strange listening to their journey. But what was it like kind of, growing up in that whole Orange County area in the 90s? Like wasn't that like
Well,
skate?
my formative years were probably like more like inland and like the Temecula Riverside County area. But I've had so many friends out here that are from everywhere else that you could think of. And there's very few that are actually from here. And everybody thinks that's not from here, that everything is Los Angeles and it's a huge city everywhere. And they don't realize that there are small suburbs, small towns. The town I grew up in was probably smaller than most of my friends' towns that grew up in other states.
Mhm.
And so it was fun. It was a very 1980s Goonies, Steven Spielberg-esque
Existence?
upbringing. And so yeah.
It is kind of urban sprawl all the way from Los Angeles to San Diego though, isn't it?
Well, that's the thing is this was the early 90s, and when I went out, when my parents moved out to the Temecula area, there was like 20,000 people in that whole surrounding area. There was only one high school for like a 25-mile radius. Our high school was massive, though. We had 3,000 people in our high school.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
There were 600 people in my graduating class. We had to do it at the minor league Storm, like baseball stadium, because it was that big. Because so many people moved out there so quickly.
Mhm.
So the town I grew up in was probably less than 10,000 people. And so there's a lot of small towns at that time, but it exploded overnight.
Yeah.
And over the last 20, 30 years, it's just crazy. Now it's like there's no land in between that. They just built swaths and swaths of tract homes.
It's been crazy how people have just been flooding out to the West Coast. I think now there's maybe a little bit more of a movement out of California, but like up until like 2019 and like everyone was just flooding in.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, the problem is it's just so expensive out here compared to a lot of other states. My grandparents came out here in the '60s on both sides, pretty much, and from Michigan, and I think a lot of people came around that time for the weather and the lifestyle and all that.
Yeah. It's wild. I've only been here for about a year. Like I kind of came last November, 2023. So I'm just like 14 months into my LA adventure.
Cooking with yes, you're doing all these podcasts already. You're doing meeting all these new people.
Well, that's the thing. It's like if you come to a town and you don't know anyone, the best thing to do is try to meet as many people as you can.
Start a podcast because it forces them to talk to you, right?
Well, if it's a town of people who like to talk about themselves, so if you
Yeah.
put them on a podcast and start asking them questions, you're fine.
That's why this is a really maybe that's why I haven't been as successful as I should have been because I don't like to talk about myself that much.
Yeah, it's true. It's pretty fun though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool.
I think you're like almost number 130. I think we've done about 126 or 27 podcasts so far since I started last January.
Wow, good for you.
Yeah. Yeah, 2 a week, and it's been great, and, I've talked to everyone, like, people who believe in the afterlife and people who make movies and people who write scripts and books and everything, and it's just been an amazing kind of journey through it's great, like, LA is so eclectic, and people from all over the world come here, and even if you're talking to someone in London or, Germany or Switzerland or Italy, like they're going to be in LA at some time and you
Yeah.
just wait for them to show up. And then when they do, you lock in a good chat and then they're on their way again. So it's been a real nice kind of journey of scheduling with people, inviting them into the studio, getting to learn about them and then staying in touch because once they come out with something new or they're working on a new project, it's always good to kind of bring them back and talk about that. So like these initial kind of podcasts where we get to know all about you are great. And then hopefully, in a couple months, you come back with a new and exciting project we just get
Well,
into.
with all my career updates, all the exposure that I got from this podcast. No, but no, it's
Yeah.
cool because I think a lot of times at this age, as you get a little bit older, you're more prone to having a clique or a bubble of a certain people, and you don't step outside your comfort zone as much, hear their stories, their backgrounds.
Yeah.
So that's exciting.
It's hard to make friends as you get older, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when you have kids. Well, you make you when you have kids, you become friends of your kids' parents, but a lot of times they're like boring and lame, and you're just doing it because of your kids, you know? And you're like, oh man, I got to hang out with those people.
Yeah. That sounds like a bit by Chappelle. I think he has a whole thing about that.
Oh, really? I'll have to look it up.
Okay, so you're going to this massive high school in the middle of nowhere, nothing around you for 25 miles, 3,000 students. Did they have an AV center? Like,
They did.
where'd you get into film?
That's a really good question. Well, I'll rewind it back a little bit more. Growing up in the suburbs, my mom was a stay-at-home housewife, but she was very artistic and she was kind of like anything goes. Not anything goes, but like she gave me a lot of free range to kind of artistically express myself. School was pretty easy for me, and so because of that, it was like blockbuster night every night. She really liked films. I loved movies, and so I watched a ton of movies and kind of fell in love with cinema, the storytelling experience, the ability to, just captivate people and make the hardest person feel an emotion and cry, shed a tear or laugh. And it's just a really unique experience that's intrinsically unique to probably maybe music and filmmaking, just a couple other select medias. So I just like that kind of escapism. And my parents didn't have a camera or anything, so I begged them to give me a camera, and they bought this crappy $80 VHS camera that was dated by like 15 years at that point. They didn't bother checking to see if it worked. They got it for me. They were so excited that it worked or so excited that they got it for me, and of course, it didn't work. It just shot in like this green mucky color, and this is before the Matrix, so it wasn't cool to have that. It was just this green,
Yeah.
like filter over it, and, even with that, I just really enjoyed, um, doing it. There was no editing software at that time. This is before kind of computer editing, and I just would film everything I could with it. Any project that I had for school, if it was marine biology or math or anything, I would convince the teachers to let me do a project and film it instead of doing the actual project that I was supposed to do.
Don't make me write.
But it probably took a lot more work to do that anyways.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I started liking that. And then,
Just go back. What were some of those influential movies that you were watching, with your mom on on Blockbuster? Because that's a time that a lot of people out there who are listening don't really remember, but I remember it.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
and those days were really cool, and that kind of goes back to as well what you were saying with us being in our comfort zone and you getting exposed to these new influences. I feel like now when we watch movies, there's these computer logarithms that choose exactly what you want, and you don't get to be exposed to that random little, diamond in the rough that you could when you were at Blockbuster and you just randomly saw this video in the aisle that you wouldn't usually pick, but you decide to go for it.
I had a strange one. I think my dad accidentally or on purpose exposed me to a ton of crazy shit when I was young. Like we did all the Rambos and the Sylvester Stallone, Schwarzenegger. We had all the violent shit
Yeah.
before I was like 10.
Oh, yeah, I watched so many horrific and violent stuff, and then in the '80s, I mean, I was born in 1982, so I'm 42 now, but in the '80s, there was just, like, it was so much slasher horror stuff, and now I'm thinking, like, my daughter's 9, and I think I was watching that already, and I can't let her watch any of that stuff.
It's hilarious.
Um back to the movies that I liked. I mean, I loved, adventure type of stuff and comedy stuff always. The Goonies, E.T., all those great, 80s films.
Indiana Jones.
Yeah, Indiana Jones. And then when we got into the '90s, I loved the Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino and those films, too. So now I write, it took a long time for me to kind of find my voice as like a writer and a filmmaker, and now I've settled on writing comedies or a shade of comedy. So if it's a dramedy, action comedy, I kind of found my voice with that. But I've uh, done short films with almost every genre you could think of, but I think it was always jamming a square peg into a round hole with those kind of things, and it didn't come naturally. It doesn't mean I don't like those other genres, it's just those are the ones that I like to create, and I think that speak to my voice the most.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. Like, I've written a few books. I haven't written a screenplay or anything like that, but I think writers have a voice in their head, and if you try to go against that, it's just gonna be strange and difficult. Like, if you just got to kind of write what's in your head, and whatever it comes out as is what it is, and you just hope it's good.
Well, there's a little more to that, but yeah, I mean, there's a truth to that. They always say that from the very beginning, "Oh, you need to find your voice, this and that." But I think that there's so many things that daunt, um, when you're an artist, you're a little bit more emotional or sensitive than most people, and I think a lot of times you're plagued with insecurity and different things. And so what do you wanna do? You wanna be able to do what you wanna do for a living, and so you find other movies that are successful even if it's not really your cup of tea, and then your work becomes watered down, it's not really your voice.
Yeah.
Like, "Oh, that film was big," so you start incorporating that, and it affects you, so it's really hard to zone out those other influences sometimes, especially if you're a huge film buff.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, just kind of like drowning out all the noise and sitting down and actually putting pen to paper must be so difficult with all the distractions.
Well, yeah, it's
Yeah.
really tough for kind of an extrovert alcoholic like myself too. It's like you really have to be in your own head all the time, and it takes a lot of discipline to do that, and it's very easy to just not what was that Spike there's a Spike Jones movie a long time ago with Nicolas Cage, about a writer, Adaptation.
Oh, that was fantastic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and, in the movie, he's like, "Yeah, I should get a muffin. I should, like, get a muffin right now." While he's sitting at the computer, "I should do this. I deserve this." And you find all these ways and excuses on getting out of there. So I think it's good to find a place with just no distractions and force yourself to just sit in the chair. I had a teacher once that said that writing is ass in chair, and there's probably truth to that.
One quote I remember Hemingway saying is, "To write is to sit at a typewriter and bleed."
Yeah, and cry.
And and cry as well. Okay, so let's go back a little. So, after high school, you went to Santa Barbara. Like, did you study film, or what did you take in Santa Barbara?
Yeah, I went to so I met it since my high school was so big, 600 people, that I met a girl in my high school that, we just hit it off the summer after high school, fell in love. She was going straight to Santa Barbara, and so I decided to go to the junior college out in, Temecula area. And while she was going up there, and we did the long distance relationship for a couple years, and I decided to move up there, and I transferred to UCSB. UC Santa Barbara, unfortunately, didn't have like a full on production program, so they had what it was like film studies, and so it was like critical analysis.
Mhm.
So you write a lot of papers, critically analyzing films, writing, and all that. So it's what I like to call intellectual masturbation.
Like there aren't enough critics.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily. The good thing is I went to the city college for a little while before I went to UCSB, so they had a full on production program
Oh,
as equipment and everything, which was cool. Um, but oh, I guess backing up, we skipped a part. At my high school, because it was the only high school and it was a new high school, they got a full on like film department.
that's amazing.
Yeah, it was really cool. My like sophomore year, I think in high school, um, I was so lucky, and I think a lot of that, unfortunately, with schools is lacking. I know that in like the 50s and 60s, there was like all these different kind of trade things, and our high school was really lucky like that. We had a film or our photography department where they had a dark room. We had
Oh, wow.
ceramics, we had auto shop, we had, like, wood and, like, machine stuff,
Mhm.
and at the time, they had, like, an AutoCAD thing where you could design, like, 3D models in the computer, and they would cut them out, and this was, like, 25 years ago,
That's amazing.
and then they got a film program, and I mean, at that time, for the most part, computers were just word processing machines. That's all there was, and it was super boring. And it would be like me filling out a insurance contract right now to get me to open up the application. It's like nails on a chalkboard, terrible.
Mhm.
And I saw for the first time when they got their equipment, they had the original IMAX. I don't know if you remember those, the colorful ones that were like a CRT screen, and they were weighed 100 pounds, and,
With the big back,
yeah, well,
with a different color. Yeah, yeah.
green, pink, all these things, and, they were playing they played a video on it, and this is the first time I saw a video, like, on a computer screen. I was like, "Oh my gosh."
Game changer.
Yeah, I mean, you need to be able to do what you love for a living, but it's good to teach, younger kids that you're not gonna love everything, but I just would go to the computer lab after class. I would sit in front of that thing for hours on end. There was a couple friends that I had that did the same, and we started doing the announcements instead of them being broadcast over the sound machine. There was like a CCT closed circuit thing where they could do the announcements, and we did all this like comedic stuff that was just ridiculous, and we got in trouble for a lot of it. I found this old, I had this like skate video where there was these skateboarders that had this like white van, and they were like running over cones and smashing into things and destroying all this stuff. And I thought, well, there's a white van on our campus that is open. So we filmed inside the white van and edited it into the footage of the other stuff. And if as long as we'd edited all of and produced the show for them, they would give us like a minute or 2 at the end where we could just show whatever we wanted.
What an audience. That's a 3,000 person theater.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, people come up to me and they're like, "Did you really destroy that car and, like, do all this stuff?" And I'm like, "No, no." And we did, like, stuff like that, and then eventually they ended up pulling us off the air because they thought it was too, I don't know, risque or whatever, but
And then just a decade and a half later, YouTube comes along.
yes. And, so that's how I kinda fell in love with the process of filmmaking. That was, like, the physical process. I hadn't studied it, like, uh, screenplays or the story aspect, yeah, and then I did started doing that when I was in college and continued on after.
That's amazing. That's so good. Like, I feel like somewhere along the way, I feel like the powers that be up above us somewhere, all the super crazy people making all the decisions, they just got rid of trade schools.
Yeah.
And they're just like, everyone has to like go into debt and go into higher, university and just, write about their feelings for 4 years and then come out unemployed.
Yeah, I mean, the other guy that was a year younger than me that was a friend of mine, I've kind of kept in touch with. His name is Andrew Kramer, and he started a company called Video Copilot, and he has a company, I think it's called Final Image. He has 65 employees. He does visual effects and all this stuff, and he learned his passion from that little department, which probably didn't cost them that much for their equipment,
Mhm.
and does it to this day. So I think the trades in different capacities and allowing kids to do something tangible is really important.
Yeah, not everyone wants to sit around and read philosophy for 4 years.
Yeah, get a degree in Russian literature and modern dance or something.
I have a degree in international politics and political philosophy,
Oh wow, that's heavy. That's real heavy.
and I climb mountains for a living.
That's awesome. Well, yeah. So when I graduated Santa Barbara, I mean, we did lots of papers. I mean, I wrote probably a thousand pages when I was there, and when I graduated, I was like, I can't get a job doing like writing film or anything like that. But I had the editing experience from high school, which I continued when I was in college. And I did some short films that I was in college, that one of which got into the Santa Barbara International Film Festival. So that kind of motivated me to push forward. And I started just doing post-production because that's something tangible that I could, make a living doing after I graduated college.
That's wild. I mean, what's it like growing up kind of on the periphery of Hollywood? Like, you were down in Orange County, then you moved inland, then you're up in Santa Barbara. Like, you're dancing around this magical place where things are made. I mean, did it kind of motivate you? Like, fuck, I'm gonna tell stories for a living. Like, this is gonna be like the thing I do. Or were you kind of like sheepish about it? Like, yeah, I'll try this for a bit, and if it doesn't work, I'll try that. Like, what was your conviction like coming out of UC Santa Barbara?
Oh, I thought it was going to be Steven Spielberg immediately.
There we go.
I thought it was gonna be, Paul Thomas Anderson. I mean, that Paul Thomas Anderson, I think, did Boogie Nights when he was 25 years old.
That fucking movie was great.
Or John Singleton, that was, I think, out of USC, did Boys in the Hood.
Mhm.
Yeah, I thought it was gonna be like totally like that. And then the harsh reality comes. But there was never. I mean, obviously, as an artist, you always. I mean, I think even the greats have self-doubt. I think you question the decisions you make. Even the most confident director, somebody like Tarantino or something, probably is lying if he doesn't ever say second-guessed choices that he made.
I think they're crippled with anxiety and just, misdirection. Like, like how to have that kind of pressure on you for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, however long the shoot is, and then the post after that, making all those decisions, it must be it's a real challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I've never even directed a feature, but I've directed dozens of shorts, hundreds of commercials, if not thousands. Most of those were low budget, but reality shows, and on those shoots, I usually don't even eat. I mean, I don't even stop to have a bite of food. There's a lot going on. There's a lot you have to do as the director, and a lot falls on your shoulders if there's any mistakes
Mhm.
made. I would love to work on a big project where you could hire the best of the best on everything and relieve some of that load.
I think someone was telling me the other day, like being a film director is making 1,000 decisions a day, and it doesn't even matter if you make the wrong decision, but you have to make the quick decision because like making the wrong decision quickly, you can see it's going the wrong way, and then you can bring it back. But if you're just stalling on all these decisions, then they just keep piling up, and then no one's doing anything, and there's no progression.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing I mean, film shoots notoriously shoot very long days, and it's to save money because you're burning so much cash. I mean, there's so many different people that are standing around that are paid well, and it, if you run days over your shoot, it's just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. So where'd you go? Where was your first post production job out of school?
I worked for a company that did when I graduated in 2006, and in 2006, the DVD special features market was very popular.
Oh wow, that's a throwback.
Yeah. All the special feature stuff. So, I mean, movies spent so much money doing special features. People would buy the DVDs just to see kind of the special features. And so I worked for a company that did all the behind the scenes stuff for different movies. and I would do post-production on those and edit them and
Those are the best bits.
dub house and stuff, yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. I do remember, like, they used to have, like, a director's cut sometimes, and then they would have, like, the director watching the film and talking to the audience about it, and sometimes they have, like, the two stars watching it together, watching it, and those were all different audio tracks you could put on. It was amazing.
Yeah, and they
Yeah.
do interviews with the filmmakers or the actors and
Well,
all that, and so, yeah, I did that for a while, and then did freelance editing on top of that, and then I worked for CAA for a while. They have a creative services department,
mm,
and so they did, like, all of the reels, self-tape, I mean, now they call it self-tape, but it was audition, related stuff in-house. And then the agents would send out these reels, and at the time, they were all on DVD, to producers, managers, directors, trying to get them to cast their clients, so did that for a while.
what was that like? I mean, like, you got these talented people's lives in your hands.
Well, I was just pushing buttons pretty much because 'cause they'd tell you exactly kind of what they wanted, like, to pull out of certain stuff.
Mhm.
It's very corporate, I mean, um, it drips with money. The CA lobby is like just solid marble, and the foyer is beautiful. You see famous people and celebrities.
Was your boss Ari Gold?
No, I know, right?
I miss Entourage. I would love them to come back and do, Entourage with everyone in, like, their 40s.
Yeah, I mean, I love those days of kind of like un-PC comedy related just
Yeah.
yeah, so I did that for a while, and it was very corporate though. I had to wear like a suit and tie to work and stuff, and then I formed my own company called One Way Pictures, and I opened up a studio in Santa Monica where I was just specifically doing post production. So I was editing sizzle reels, trailers, behind the scenes stuff, reality show pilots,
That
stuff along
that's in
those lines.
that's interesting because, like, how long did it take you to, like, be in Hollywood to have the confidence to be like, "Yeah, I'm gonna open up my own shop."
It takes some guts because at the time, this was 2008, or and this is only like 3 or 4 years after college.
It's a huge move, like, taking on the overhead, having to pay yourself, like.
Yeah, because the studio space, I think it was like $1,000 a month, but at that time you could get a decent, not a super nice, but a decent apartment with one-bedroom apartment with a pool on the west side for like a grand. So it was like doubling your rent,
Mhm.
and you had to cook that into the overhead. Yeah, so
Wow, 1 bedroom for a grand, huh? Things have
yeah.
changed.
Oh my gosh, I mean, I live in North Hollywood now, and like a crappy one bedroom is probably, $2,300 a month or something like that. So,
Hey, were you affected at all by those, that night when the fires hit Runyon Canyon? Because that all happened around North Hollywood, right?
Um, yeah, no, I luckily I wasn't. But I'll show you a picture later of the fires, and it's like crazy. My townhouse is like 3 stories. We climbed up onto the roof the night that it was cresting the Palisades fire, not the Runyon Canyon one. In the end, you could just see the flames just cruising over towards Encino. It was wild.
Yeah. I've had a few firefighters on the podcast as well. It's been pretty, like, interesting getting their take on just everything that happened and things like that, but it's been insane the last couple of weeks just watching the response and everything like that. It's been so difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a native to California. I've never seen anything like this. I watched a little bit of the podcast that you had with your most recent guy. I forget his name, but yeah, I mean, they're just popping up everywhere. I don't know for sure. It seems very arsony to me.
Arsony? Targeted for sure.
Yeah, a homeless person burned down the Dollar Tree right by our place. Just went in and threw gasoline all over it not too long ago. So I don't know. I don't want to blame it on them, but it seems a little convenient that all of them just sprouted up in different places. So I don't know. Thank God that we got those rains. I mean,
Yeah.
they're out now. I think they're all out. Hopefully,
I think, yeah, like, there's a new one that, just came out that's quite a bit north of, Santa Clarita, I think, and that one's still cooking.
that one exploded really quick. I mean, it went from like 0 acres to 10,000 acres by Castaic. My wife used to work there. She worked. My wife's a business manager. She specializes in entertainment clients, and so they like manage their assets and their career, or not their careers, but their finances and all that.
Mhm.
And she worked for a company that was over there by Magic Mountain Parkway, and her coworker sent her a picture of the smoke, and it just looked crazy.
Yeah. That's unbelievable, isn't
She's
it?
in Beverly Hills now, so she's
So here's the conspiracy theory of the moment. I haven't really talked to anyone about this too much, but I think you're up for it a little bit here. So it's very common in other parts of the world for people to set fires to areas that they want to redevelop.
yeah.
So I was in Turkey back in 2022 in the summer, and there's a very beautiful resort town in southern Turkey called Bodrum, and it's very popular. Lots of rich people with yachts and stuff like that. And these hotel developers wanted to start taking down this forest that was next to the city, so they could expand out their hotels and their beachfront properties and stuff like that. And the government said no. And it was a huge thing in the news. And then, like 5 days later, a huge fire erupted in that forest and completely cleared exactly the property that they wanted to build on. And then, like 6 months later, they got building permits.
That's so crazy. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I definitely am interested in talking about conspiracies, but I don't dig too much in them because I just don't know for sure. But I will say that I knew a handful of people that lost their homes in the Palisades, and they were not super. They were very modest homes that they owned for 40 that plus years, and their parents owned them, and they bought them for, pennies on the dollar for what it is now. I mean, real estate has exploded not just in California, but nationwide drastically over the last, 5, 10 years. And these homes, California has Proposition 13, 14, I think it's something like that, where essentially when you purchase the reason why property values accelerate higher in California than they do in other states is because you lock in the purchase price for your property taxes, and they can only very incrementally increase it over time.
Hmm.
So if you have $1 million property and you pay like 1.25%, it can only like very incrementally increase the or the property taxes over time. So even if your property goes up to $5 million, it's worth 5 times as much. You're still paying a very small property tax on what it used to be.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, and so like places like Dallas, Texas, and stuff, they have 0% income tax, but their property taxes are like 2.5% or something like that. So if you have a $1 million place, you're paying 50 or $25,000 a year, and every year the assessor comes out and tells you how much it's worth, and if it goes up, your property taxes go up.
That's a bump
Uh,
deal.
and so it's a little in some of those places, it's a little increased property value, or appreciation in property values is a little bit. It's connected to essentially increased property taxes, because if your property taxes went up drastically, you'd have to factor that into the cost of the house. So there's a lot of people that had low property taxes on these houses, and um, there's always the thing about gentrification, like gentrification in places where supposedly people would run down like inner city areas so the property values would drop, people would move out, and then developers would come in and buy the properties.
I think that's going on in San Francisco right now.
I wouldn't. I mean, I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, a lot of people are moving out of there left and right. I mean, there's poop everywhere.
Yeah.
Um, and so, I mean, I know that in 2007, 2008, there was like nothing in downtown LA, like nothing. If you could buy like a warehouse for a couple $100,000, and it's probably worth like $3 million now.
Wow.
There was like everybody just left the second that the sun went down. They were there was banking institutions, accounting firms, stuff like that, and then just everybody left. There was no arts district. There was no breweries. Uh, this one place I remember that opened up in like 2008. It was like a German sausage place that had like weird stuff like alligator sausage and different things. It's called the Sticky. It's still there. Arts.
And that was the one that brought everyone back.
That was the one. That was the one. So I don't know. There's definitely it. I mean, but then you have to ask yourself, if somebody did that, were they willing to kill people for burning the place down? And I mean, I don't know, I don't know. I just know that the winds were high, obviously. I think the response was a little bit late.
Mhm.
Firefighters have been doing an amazing job, putting their life on the lines and everything. But it did pop up in a bunch of random places.
Yeah, it's not, it's the thing that's amazing to me is that they haven't come out and said what caused everything yet. Yeah. It's like that's the
You've
most.
been here for 14 months, you said?
Yeah, I came November 2023.
So is that when we got the insane rains? Like it rained like insane? So that's the most rain that we've gotten in like 10 years or
Mhm.
something. A crazy amount of rain. And I grew up next to two firefighters as a kid. And I go back and visit my parents and they'll say, "Oh man, we got all these rains this year. That means that next year the fire season is going to be really bad because when you get a lot of rain, the brush grows and all the weeds and everything, and then it makes it more likely for it to have bad fires the next season. There's like a fire season. So that's kind of one thing is I feel like they kind of knew that it was going to be some fires.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because if you have a huge amount of rain over 1 month or 2 months in the wintertime like we did back then, everything grows, but then the rain stops and then everything dries out. So you're just growing fresh tinder
Yeah.
to destroy the world.
And the concern as a filmmaker is that so many jobs have left Southern California in the film industry. And a lot for a long time, it was very heavily connected to tax credits. I mean, you're a Canadian. And so we lost a lot of business in Vancouver and different places like that. But Vancouver now is so crazy expensive, even with the tax credits. But it would go to different places and, Georgia, New Mexico, Canada.
Well, Netflix just built a huge place in Albuquerque, and Disney does all their stuff out of Atlanta.
Yeah, so they're going a lot of the stuff is leaving. A lot of my friends are having a lot of trouble. It's been very slow, for me with work, and that's why I've been, like, kinda developing my screenplays and working on that a lot heavily. But with that, there's a real concern that that business is leaving and the film industry is leaving, but for a very long time, like, all of, at least Los Angeles's economy, a huge portion of it was entertainment industry, and, now that we've had this catastrophic thing, I don't think people realize how much tax revenue is going to be gone from all of these buildings disappearing.
Mhm.
If you have a $4 million house and you paid like 1.2%, that's $50,000 a year or something like that, or more in property taxes. And there's thousands of houses like that. The second the house burns down, and the structure's demolished, you don't have to pay the full property taxes. It's just on the land, so it's significantly lower.
Oh, I didn't know that. I read some stories that people still had to pay property taxes and were still paying mortgage payments and all this kind of
You
stuff.
do, and they probably have to lock something in, but when the structure's gone, that's why, like, you might see out here, in, like, West Hollywood and whatnot, if a lot of times, like, a developer will buy a property, and if they're really gonna develop it and they're able to kinda get through some of the red tape, they'll essentially bulldoze the property, and then it'll be a lot for a while they're gonna build it, so they don't have to have all those carrying costs for a while. So, they're gonna lose lots of money and revenue from this. So, we'll see what happens.
I mean, if I was living in the Palisades and my house burned down and I had to run away in the middle of the night with nothing, grab your animals, grab your hard drives, whatever you need if you would depending on your business.
Pictures
Yeah.
now on hard drives.
Then and then I had to watch that shit happen and I was like living in a hotel or living in one of these shelters around town. Like I don't think I would go back.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, there's so many the insurance, insurance on these properties is gonna go through the absolute roof. I guess it depends on the situation you're in. I saw this video of this, real estate agent that sold, like, 70% of the properties in, like, Malibu, and he said that 70% of people are not gonna return.
Mhm.
I don't know the validity in that. I guess it depends on how much equity you had on the property, what the land is worth. I know that people are giving crazy low blow offers for the land, and a lot of people were canceled from their insurance. My HOA building was almost canceled from our insurance last year, and I know our homeowners insurance went up like 25% or something last year. So
Wow.
we'll see how this shakes out.
This is, yeah, it's a wild one. I think I think now that the fires are kind of controlled, now people I hope are going to start kind of like demanding some real answers.
Yeah, I saw this video too on like Facebook or something in Japan. My wife's half Japanese. I've been to Japan uh, 4 times, and it's a cool culture because they find ways to make things a little bit better, or they find problems, or they take something that's existing and they put their spin on it. And I saw this thing that they had that's, I guess there's an area, I think it's in Nagata or something like that, where it's very dry, and I guess they're prone to fires. And so they have this shed thing that is maybe 3 or 4 feet tall, and it's just a crazy sprinkler system that pops out of the shed, and it's like its own firefighting hose type of thing that just sprays everything. And you'd think that implementing something like that, if you're in a fire zone, would be something that might need to be done in the future.
So actually, my last guest, Brian Howard, he's a firefighter. He's a retired firefighter, and he set up he created this thing where it's a pump, and what you do is you put one end of it into your swimming pool because everyone out here has a fucking swimming pool.
And is it the gasoline thing,
No,
or
it
it's like
shoots.
ones with gas, or it's run with gas, like you pull it like a weed whacker type of thing, like
Yeah,
yeah.
and it's a pump, and it pumps out all the water from your pool, and it sprays the house and stuff like that, and you can, like I think you can just, like, get it started and leave it and then run, and then you just pray to God, like, your house, doesn't go to fire, but he was saying, like, a fire truck maybe only has, like, a certain amount of water, but, like, your average swimming pool in LA County, like,
Fuck,
has, like, 10x of what a fire,
yeah.
truck would have. So, he goes, like, "Don't wait for a fire truck, like, save your house yourself, or at least set it up and then make a run for it to get to safety." So, he's really trying to like, he's retired, so he's kinda getting into some entrepreneurial activity, and
Oh,
that's
that'd
where
be interesting. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people would buy that. I mean, they make you have on like a building, you have to have like a fire extinguisher. So having something like that could be beneficial. It's sad, like in some places they just went up like hotcakes, and other places didn't go up at all. And I heard some story about a guy like I mean, they found like a dead guy holding a hose trying to protect his house, but then other people tried to protect their house, and hosing it off actually worked. I don't know where I would lie in that situation,
yeah.
but I feel for people, because if you really owned your home for a really long time and maybe it's paid off, there's no way you could buy another place, because it's kind of like you would just have to buy a place that's way more expensive, and it would cost you more than what you had. So I think there was a lot of people that were older, that were trying to save their homes the best they could.
Yeah. I think there's gonna be a huge exodus out of California after this. Yeah. Hey, let's go back to happier topics. So,
Uh,
for filmmaking, so you started up your own company. You
yeah,
got you had your office out in Santa
yeah.
Monica. Like, who are your first clients?
So I had a lot of independent producers that were trying to get, clients that were kind of doing like forensic files type of shows, a ghost hunter type of shows, and I would produce like sizzle reel type of things for them. And most it started off just being post production, and I was renting a studio, an office space in Santa Monica, and like a creative space that was surrounded by like other post production places. And um, I thought that would kind of bring in and give me some prestige to some higher end clients. The goal has always been to produce and direct, um, but after graduating, I needed something tangible. I mean, I had student loans, I had to pay my bills, and you know, as a first time director with a script or something, people aren't kicking down your door, so you have to offer people something tangible. So there's kind of two routes you can take. You can try to work your way up from the bottom at a company, or you could kind of do the freelance route. And at the time when I graduated, I was offered a job at a trailer editing company as an assistant at a college for $7 an hour,
7.
or 750 or something like that. And I mean, I couldn't survive on that. And so I started working for myself, and I was immediately making, 20, $25 an hour just editing. And this was like 20 years ago.
Back when $25 was $25.
Yeah, and so it still was a tough living because I had to pay the rent on the studio, and I did that for a while, and I had some quick success, and then it kinda just plateaued out, and it became expensive to maintain the studio space, and so I worked at CA for a while, like I said, and then, I got a job at a studio in Santa Monica. And, I feel like this is coming full circle with this studio here because, this was 2014, 2015, and I worked at a company or it was Santa Monica Studios, but it was also a company called Kids in the House, and they produced, like, thousands of videos. They had, like, 10,000 videos of authors that were experts in the field of, like, parenting related stuff. So there was, like, psychologists, authors that dozens of different kinds of authors, everything that you could possibly think of, pediatricians, to do with that. And it was weird because I ironically had a kid right around that time, right, and when I got the job, and my boss wanted to build a live stream studio,
Mm.
and it was very unique at the time because nobody was doing that. It wasn't as streamlined, and now, I mean, we had to spend like $250,000 or something probably to build it out from scratch, which I spearheaded, and it was a very technical and complicated undertaking at the time. And now you can just grab stuff for a grand out of the box and
Something like this.
yeah, and do it yourself.
Yeah.
So we started doing stream stuff. We live stream to Facebook, YouTube, different platforms. And we would do interviews, but it would be more of like a talk show setting where there would be like 4 or 5 people. And then we would Skype in guests from remote locations, a lot of times like on the East Coast or anywhere else. Because when we were doing all of the interviews initially, we had to fly people out and film them in the studio. And then suddenly it opened up, a whole lot of new opportunities of what we could accomplish. So I did that for about 4 or 5 years, and then I had a client that did a lot of legal stuff, and the COVID happened, and I had my son, and I decided to go back to my own business and started producing all the commercials and stuff on my own.
That's epic. So COVID was the switch that got you back working for yourself again?
Yeah, that was kind of where it was. Part of it was I had moved. I lived on the west side for, gosh, like 10 years probably. I lived in West LA for 3 or 4 years, and then I lived in Marina Del Rey for 5 years. And when I moved to the Valley, because we wanted to buy a place, we couldn't afford something in Marina Del Rey. We would just get like a really small shoebox, and me and my wife wanted to have kids.
Sure.
So I moved to the Valley, and immediately I got the job in Santa Monica. And
Serendipitous.
yes, and it was about an hour and 15 on the way to work, sometimes an hour and a half, and then it could be sometimes as much as, I mean, one time it took me 2 hours and 45 minutes to get home. It was crazy.
How hard is that?
It usually would be at least an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes. So it was about 3 hours each day, and it was a 9 to 5 for the most part. And it was just, yeah, it was just tough. The only thing that me through it was like books on tape. It's like and a lot of times music doesn't work when you're in traffic because it gives you like angst,
Mhm.
like you are like, you can't go anywhere in traffic. I don't mind commuting if it's like less than 30 minutes or 45 minutes each way. Like my wife is doing now, about an hour to Beverly Hills, 45 minutes to an hour, but
That's tough.
3 hours a day in the car is real tough. So hopefully the self-driving car stuff happens because then you could just take a nap on your way to work or whatever.
Yeah, or work on the way to work and still get stuff done. No, it's crazy. The traffic around here just doesn't make any real sense. Like it's just there's too many people.
So that was part of it that kind of pushed me in, and then having another kid, and then the client that I had, I was doing a lot of for years. I had a client that was doing kind of like Larry H. Parker kind of commercials where it was like mostly motion graphic based. So it was something that I could do on my side when I was working on my other projects, or with my full time gig. And then suddenly his business was expanding drastically, and he's like, "Hey, I want to produce live action commercials with people in a studio." And so I had all this experience from doing it with the other studio for a while, and so I decided to branch out on my own and do it that way.
Yeah. That's epic. That's pretty cool, and that was all just around COVID.
Yeah, and it was really nice I mean, I was the most busy. I think part of the success with doing that stuff during COVID as well was, um, a lot of people were really hurt with production during that time, but because I was working at the other studio and I was wearing so many hats myself, I was doing, the audio mixing, I was doing the video editing while we did it, I was doing, like, post-production after the fact, I was miking up everybody, the lights. Sometimes I'd have 1 or 2 other people helping.
Yeah.
If we produced a big commercial for somebody else, we would have a full crew or an agency there. Uh,
But you were invaluable, you were doing everything.
but since I was doing everything, when COVID happened, there was all these rules for, like, having, like, special, like, PPP coordinator, like, people for COVID, and a lot of studios wouldn't let you shoot if you had more than, like, 5, 6, 7 people there. And so because I was able to do it all, I was able to get a lot of work during that time because we could get in and get it done. So I was the busiest I've ever been during COVID.
That's amazing because that's a different story than you hear from most people.
Yeah, no, I feel bad for a lot of the people's businesses that were affected during that time, but for me, it was good.
I was in Ethiopia filming my television show Extreme Treks for BBC Earth when the world closed in March 2020.
Oh my,
And I barely got out, and then I ended up in Turkey, Istanbul, Turkey for 4 months, and because I lived in Dubai at the time, and
done
Dubai.
so much traveling. That's awesome.
Yeah, and being stuck in the last 3, 4 years, just being stuck all around the world in the wrong places, people don't really understand, like, global travel didn't really become free again until, like, early 2022, mid-2022, and China didn't even reopen until, like, spring 2023. So even though, like, the United States was maybe back to business in 2021, like, the rest of the world or traveling international borders and just the COVID tests and all that stuff was just painful. Because like, I was traveling, like, 250 days a year making 8 to 10 episodes of adventure stuff all the time, so we obviously had to shut down completely, so
Stuff that you've done and that I've seen or looks awesome.
it
I
was
watched one episode with the Malta episode
ah.
for what was it? Nomad was the name of your show, or
Yeah, that was the one we actually shot that during COVID. So we planned. So I'd been do. So okay, first I was doing. I went to China when I was 22, and then I worked for the New York Times, and I freelanced for 100 other newspapers and magazines. But the New York Times were my main clients, and I was a photographer. So they had a writer. I would go out with the writer. I'd shoot the stuff, and I loved it. And 10 years I did that. I covered all of China. I worked everywhere. I worked on big stories. We had covers all the time. It was really a rewarding experience. Um, and then print publishing died when Lehman Brothers collapsed in, like, 2008, 2009. So then I moved into television because I still wanted to travel and meet people. And then I funded my first TV show, which was Tough Rides China, where I rode a motorcycle all around China with my brother Colin. And then we set a Guinness World Record and we made a 6-part TV show about it. And then we did a bunch more after that. And then I got into the trekking stuff. And then in 2019, I was like, I really want to do, like, a show that was a little bit like Anthony Bourdain's show called The Layover.
yeah, I was gonna say you're like Anthony Bourdain in this show, drinking a glass of beer at the end of the episode or a gin tonic.
For breakfast.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then, yeah. So it's like, what do I do in between all these adventures? And I go to all these cool towns and meet Michelin star chefs and
Getting
bartenders,
paid
and
to travel.
yeah. So that was good. But we came up with that concept in 2019, and we started getting funding for it, and then COVID hit.
Wow.
And then I said, look, I told the people, like, look, just give me whatever we can get now. And I went from Istanbul, where I was stuck for about 4.5 months. Then I went to Europe, got into Europe, and then travel in Europe was pretty free in 2020. So we filmed in, like, Switzerland, we filmed in Poland, we filmed in Malta, Croatia, Montenegro, Germany. So we just did as much filming as we could. And then in November 2020, all of Europe locked down again. And even, like, you couldn't even cross European borders,
Was
which was
that like the Omicron thing or some kind of variant that my friend moved to Thailand in 2021, I wanna say, or yeah, I think it was the beginning of 2021, and he had to get like a full on like visa thing and go through a bunch of loopholes and everything.
It was just hard. It was hard to do anything. So then, by November 2020, we were just done. So we just went back to Dubai and chilled out for the winter. And then hopefully we thought it was just going to be, everything was going to be okay in summer 2021, but it wasn't. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was really strange. For people who traveled for a living, it was bizarre.
Oh, I mean, it was a long, long lockdown nightmare that just went on forever, and LA took it really seriously. My wife had to give birth to my son in a mask.
Oh, Jesus.
Even though they tested her negative for COVID going in, she had to wear a mask the entire time she was in labor. And she was in labor for like 2 hours at the hospital, and they wouldn't even let me into the hospital. Finally, they let me in. But it was pretty wild. My son doesn't even know what that was like, and hopefully it never happens again. I feel so sorry for the kids that were like missed out on their proms and like coming of age moments that they weren't able to kind of experience.
Graduating high school, graduating university. Yeah. It was fucked up. It was a bit fucked up. Yeah. But hey, hopefully we're through it now. But then you had a writer strike, then you have an actor strike, then now we got fires. What's wrong with this town?
It's crazy. Um, so so my career path was always like I wanted to do technical because I could do technical stuff. I always thought that the more stuff, it sounds like you wear a lot of hats as well. You're doing a lot of different stuff with your shows as well, and it's really cool now with technology to be able to do a lot of things. It definitely streamlines the process.
Mhm.
And I've always tried to be more technical on it. But now with work slowing down a little bit with commercials and what's going on with the film industry in Los Angeles, a lot of people for a long time were saying survive until or
Survive till 2025.
survive until 2025 and all of these things. That I took this. I took a handful of screenwriting classes before when I was in college, but I decided to take the master's like professional program at UCLA during COVID, and I did it over Zoom, and it was a really rewarding experience, and I realized that I'm trying to put more emphasis on, like, writing and development and kind of focus on more of the directing and the writing than wearing all of these different things. I've done a handful of short films, and I always would do a lot of different things myself, and I think that it's great that I knew how to do those things, but I there might be a little bit of truth of jack of all trades, ace of none.
Yeah, yeah.
My dad was a general contractor and he could do everything growing up, and he taught me how to do a lot of different things, and I tried to do that. So I was very technically oriented, but the last couple of years I've been trying to focus on, sticking to writing and directing and to get better at that, with the hopes that I could kind of recalibrate the engine and go back to what I always wanted to do because it was fun. Like a lot of the commercials and the shows that I was doing were fun to work on, and I was still like in the industry working on filmmaking, but I wasn't doing the narrative stuff I wanted to, and so I'm kind of coming full circle back to what I wanted to do. So
That's exciting though.
yeah,
Yeah. It's nice because, like, storytelling is so varied, right? Like you can have a voice, writing, you can have a voice directing, you can have a voice editing, you can have a voice composing music. It's just so it's so varied. Like you can pick and choose and even and even float between all of them as you're kind of doing, right? Like,
yeah,
taking time to learn each skill, and that's the moment that becomes super valuable is when you're doing like a low budget project and you end up producing, directing, maybe you're in it, and then you're editing it afterwards, but you can do it because you got all the skills.
yeah. You can definitely make your. I mean, like I saw your Nomad show, and it looks like $1 million. I mean, it looks amazing.
Thank you, thank you.
Could definitely the more that you know technically, especially when you're working on lower budget things, the quality is you don't have to delegate all the responsibilities to everyone. And when you're working on a lower budget project, one person that doesn't know their craft super well can destroy your project. I mean,
Completely.
if you don't hire, I mean, the best sound guy and they mess up on something or the camera guy deletes something, it can really screw up the whole thing. When you work on a bigger budget project, you can hire somebody with an extensive list of credits that is, one of the best in their field. But when you're working on the smaller things, you really have to know the ins and outs of the different uh, departments and
Be a lot more careful.
yeah.
Yeah. It's not easy. So, I mean, how rewarding has kind of getting back into screenwriting been? Like, you're writing scripts. Like, are you someone who feels like you've got a lot of stories inside to tell?
I do, but forcing myself to sit in the chair is very difficult.
Yeah. How many kids do you have?
I have 2.
Yeah.
But it's just like, even if I'd had no kids, it would I had a screenwriting teacher when I was in, like, college that said, "I hate fucking writing." He said, "I like to have written." And there's a little truth to that. It's really fun to kinda come up with an initial idea, but like anything that's worth pursuing, um, the idea is worthless almost. It's the execution of something. I assume that it's the same with business and other industries. It's really easy to come up with an initial idea, and that's when you fall in love with it. That's when the endorphins are coming out and you're super excited.
Yes.
But what separates it, being successful is kind of finding that execution. That's what writing is all about. It's easy to come up with a log line that is I could tell you for a movie and you'd be like, "Oh, wow, that sounds amazing." And then you think, "Okay, where does it go?" I mean, perfect example is there's so many movies where the first act or the first 20 minutes or 30 minutes are like, "Wow," and then it just kind of falls apart. And
Mm.
being a writer is like forcing yourself to kind of continue to stare at that screen and get rid of the things that you fell in love with initially because they don't fit the parameters of the whole film, and that process is tough.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe some people absolutely love that, but for me, it's tough and it requires a lot of discipline to do.
Yeah, I've always fell in love with, like, non-scripted stuff, but I think because of of being able to just be in the flow. So, like, that whole Nomad thing that we did, like, there was no script for that. It's just like, we're gonna go here, talk to this person, we're gonna go here, talk to this person, then it's just whatever happens in the moment, right? Just make
Yeah.
sure the lighting's good, the cameras are up, and then, get all the B-roll and the cutaways and things like that, and then it's just all about that moment with another person. I
It's
love it.
really fun to direct that stuff, because you can a lot of times find the story in the edit bay, so
Yeah. All those strange looks and those strange little moments, like so, I mean, like, what do you I mean, what do you got coming out in, like, the next 6 or 8 months? Like, what are you kinda working towards at the
yeah.
moment?
I'm sending my work right now. So I have two comedies that I've written features. I've written a bunch of screenplays over the years. I remember I had a screenwriting teacher a long time ago that says write 6 screenplays, throw them in the trash, and then you'll start getting a little bit better. And there's a little truth to that. So I've written a bunch over the past, but there's 2 scripts that I have written that
Tell me one is Dumb and Dumber with Jim Carrey. Dumb and Dumber 12 or whatever they're on now.
And, I have 2 scripts that are comedies that, one of them is more of a dramedy and one of them is a straight comedy that, I'm trying to shop around. I had a manager for about a year, and we've parted ways, so I'm looking for, new representation, and at the same time, I've sending some of my works, to those scripts to producers, and at the same time, I'm revisiting a script that I wrote, during the UCLA, class
Mm,
that is a comedy that's a pretty high concept, comedy, but I need to spend a couple months to get it to where I want to. I wanna get back in the saddle with during this time period, I've been, I still, edit and do commercials, but I've been trying to spend a little bit more time and say no to certain projects so I could focus on the long haul, the career. Um, but I'd like to get into I'd like to write an indie, feature that I can film myself. I mean, I have all my post-production equipment, editing or, camera equipment, grip equipment, lighting, all sound equipment, all that stuff. So I
mm.
wanna do something indie that is, just kinda simple.
You're ready to go. It's, it's interesting, like, how important is it for, like, a writer to have representation? Like, can you just come to Hollywood and write out scripts and send them to people, or do they have to be they have to go through a manager or an agent to someone else's manager and agent? Like, how accessible is the writing world? Because I don't
Yeah.
know this world at all.
Well, I haven't sold something yet, so I might not be the best person to ask. No, I follow a lot of people, and like I said, I've had a manager before. I think it depends on the manager, and there's definitely agents and managers can be the gatekeepers to, big people. Can't just contact if I had a script that it would be perfect for like Happy Madison, I can't just like reach out and say, Adam Sandler, please like look at my thing. But if I had a manager that had specifically worked with Happy Madison, then that would be a great fit. So I think finding it's not only finding maybe a manager or an agent that um, is notable or has notoriety, but somebody also that fits specifically what you're doing. Like I write in a very specific, um, genre, and unfortunately, I think it's starting to change a little bit. The tides are turning a little bit, but comedy has been kind of dead for the last like at least 5 years or more. There's not a lot of comedies that are made. I think that
You can't laugh at anything anymore.
yeah, I mean everything is gonna offend somebody. And when I was taking the UCLA class, like it's a workshop, so you look at you give people criticism of their work, straight to their face, and it's a really wonderful experience because it forces you to reevaluate your work, find the blind spots in your work. But sometimes you have to throw out unnecessary criticism and some people were kind of like offended with certain things here and there, and you just kind of take that criticism and throw it in the trash can because, in my opinion, I think that comedy is about offending people to
Absolutely.
an extent.
We grew up in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't even. I mean, the old like um, Andrew Dice Clay,
Yeah, fuck
Eddie
yes.
Murphy, and shit like that. Like I didn't. I was almost too young to see those things, and I'm writing a screenplay, about a stand-up comic right now, and, so I went back and revisited some of that stuff, and it's like, that shit is edgy.
I remember
It
sitting with
getting canceled immediately now. I think people like Shane Gillis saying retard and things like that. It's changing a little bit, but I mean, when I first graduated college, in I was broke, and it was 2006, and I came to Los Angeles. My parents never took me to Los Angeles when I lived, down south growing up, and so I was experiencing it kind of for the first time. And one thing that was awesome is there was all these like tape shows and this free stuff that you could do if you really wanted to. And I went in to see to the Def Comedy Jam,
oh, shit.
and I was the only fucking white guy in this thing, and and immediately they were just saying these white jokes off the bat, like boom, 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 and I was sitting there and I was laughing at it all, and I had no problem with it. So, I think we need to laugh more. I think unfortunately, comedies are always underrated from an artistic standpoint for whatever reason.
Especially stand up.
Yeah, and so I think laughing brings people together.
I can remember sitting on a couch with my dad, and I was like 8 or 10, and he popped in like Eddie Murphy Raw, something I totally should not have been fucking watching. And he's like, "This is gonna be fucking good." And I'm like, "Okay, dad, let's do it."
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to laugh, and I think that if more people could laugh at themselves, they'd find more commonalities in each other than what divides them. So
Well, did you see what Todd Phillips said the other day? I mean, this was, yeah, I think he said this like a couple of years ago, actually, but he was obviously Todd Phillips, the director of the Hangover
Old
movies. Yeah.
School and all these comedies.
But he, when he transitioned and did the Joker, he directed Joker, the first one where Joaquin Phoenix won the Oscar, and it did really well, made $1 billion, something like that. And he was, yeah, I remember the press tour that he was doing for that. He's like, "Comedy's dead, man. You can't laugh at anything anymore. Like everyone gets all so offended." And then there's all these people out there who are still trying to write good comedies and still, do comedy. And I hope it swings back. I hope, you know what I hope? I hope that fucking Adam Sandler and Happy Gilmore too put us back on a line of having like
Is that coming out?
they finished
Oh
filming
my
it.
god,
They finished,
really?
yeah. They were filming it. They were filming it at the end of last year.
That's cool.
Yeah, so I think they're wrap production, and I think it's gonna be coming out, like, later this year.
One of the reasons why I think that comedy, part of it is that everything is so PC and you don't want to offend people, but a large part of it too is that making money in the theaters, unless it's a huge blockbuster film, is a much smaller percentage of the overall revenue. And even if it is a blockbuster, the percentage that is made domestically is much less. I heard something, you'd have to check the exact numbers, but I think that what even a blockbuster film makes in the United States, 25% is domestic and 75% is foreign. 20 years ago was the exact opposite. It was totally reversed. And so the problem with comedy sometimes is sometimes the jokes and the nuances in comedy are a little bit culturally specific.
They don't translate?
They don't translate as much, and so people don't maybe understand them in other, countries as much, so maybe that's, you know, part of it, but that also doesn't make sense because a lot of comedies don't need to have massive budgets and huge stars to recoup their investment, so hopefully Netflix and some of these streamers start producing more. I mean, the if you that's one thing I learned, by studying film is that audiences' tastes are very cyclical over time, and so you can, like, look at charts of decades where, horror films were huge in, like, the '80s. It was, like, action, adventure, horror films, so, um, tastes change and tides change, so
Yeah. I think the '90s might have been, like, the highlight of the comedy era because you had all these incredibly talented people coming out of SNL, right? Like, you had Sandler, you had Spade, you had Farley, and they all just went out and made the best movies ever.
yeah, you had, like, 1995 to, like, the mid 2006 or something like that. I mean, you had, like, old school, like I remember Vince Vaughn said that, yeah, they would just let the studios would be like, "Yeah, make an R-rated comedy, rock and roll," like,
Never again.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. No, that's amazing.
yeah, it's okay to not take everything, so serious.
Mhm. Not every movie has to have a $250 million budget either.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I like movies from all different genres. I can sit down, I love, watching thriller. I'm not a huge horror person, but I watched Halloween for the first time in a while, a couple years, like a year ago, and it still holds up, and it's an amazing film. I think all different genres have something of artistic merit, and a lot of times when you kind of mix multiple genres together, it's really fun. But there used to be, and now everything is just so serious. I mean, I'd love to see. I thought the first Shazam, which was good, even though it was like a big budget thing, because it had a lot of humor and comedy in it. But when things take themselves way too seriously, sometimes it gets a little stale, I feel like.
Yeah, like, I've enjoyed the Deadpool movies a little bit, like,
Yeah.
that was I mean, the first 2 were great, I don't know about the 3rd one, but, like, the first 2 were great because he breaks the 4th wall, he's making jokes about himself, it's pretty rude and filthy.
Self-deprecation.
Yeah. That's what the world needs, right?
Absolutely.
The superheroes that get their hands cut off and then wait for them to grow back as little baby hands.
So weird.
No, that's good, that's good. So, I mean, like, you're kind of what are we, like, we're both kinda, like, what, mid-journey here in this entertainment space? Like, what's the
It's a long haul, it's, I think you asked me earlier, what you asked me where I wanted to be in my career or where you thought I was gonna be after college and stuff, and it's always been kind of a recalibration. I think everybody does that with their career, probably even wildly successful people, as you kind of refine your voice, the type of films you're gonna tell, what your approach. So it was never that I never had the thought that I would, like, give up in any capacity. It was just like, "How am I gonna get there?" And that path has changed over time, but,
Yeah.
I think you feel like you're called to like you said yourself, you're a storyteller, and you choose whatever medium you need to tell stories, but if you feel like you're a storyteller, you tell stories, and maybe you decided, okay, well, originally I wanted to write books or a travel blog or something like that, and then it becomes a show, or a TV or writing a screenplay. It just, you kind of know if you're a storyteller or not, and you feel like that's what you didn't really have a choice in that. You were just born to do that. So
It's funny, like, so I lived in Shanghai for many, many years,
what took you there, by the way? Like what you said you were 22 when you went there?
yeah, so I grew up in Toronto, Canada, right?
Yep.
Great place to grow up.
I can tell by the way you pronounce some things.
Yeah. But so I went to
I
school,
love Toronto, by the way. It's a
loved it.
cool city.
Yeah, it's not bad, right?
Yeah.
Um, so grew up, played basketball from the age of like 8 to the age of 22. Played all through our high school was, we won a bunch of championships. And then I played for the University of Toronto, so I played, like, whatever the Division One version of basketball is in Canada, which
You
isn't
didn't
as
make it
good.
to the Raptors?
No, I didn't, so that was part of it, like, so from 8 to 22, what's that, like, what,
14
14
years.
years, I was completely consumed. Like I was playing on 2 teams, training 4 or 5 hours a day.
Wow.
It was a lot. And when you play like basketball in university, like you have to play all summer too. You don't take any time off. You don't get Christmas off and stuff like that. There's always tournaments. So by the time I was 22, I was really like excited to try to take it further. Maybe I could play for the national team or maybe play professionally overseas or something like that. It definitely wasn't good enough for the NBA. But I couldn't get anything and nothing was really moving. So I just decided to stop cold turkey and just like get out of Dodge. So I was kind of like lost. I didn't know what I wanted to do. But I took in my second year of university, I took one class on like introduction to modern China. I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna go to China. And I just decided that. And I left for China like a week and a half after nine
Did you
eleven.
take a study abroad class, or you just decided to drop out of school and go to China?
Well, I graduated.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I graduated and then I was like, I was looking around at all my friends, some of them were going to law school, some of them were going to business school, and that really didn't interest me at all. And I was just like, I took a few classes on China, like I'm going to go to China, travel around a bit, learn something about the world, and then I'll come back and maybe I'll get a job. And the moment I landed in China and started traveling around, I was like, fuck it, this is going to be my life.
It was a little different than Toronto.
A little bit. I mean, Toronto's got a Chinatown and stuff like that, but the mainland is a different beast.
Oh, wow, that's
So, I spent that first trip. I did 90 days all around
Were you
China.
in Shanghai or Hong Kong or Beijing? Where were you?
So the first trip I did everything. So I had like a $20 a day budget, and
So this was a personal trip.
yeah,
Oh,
completely, yeah, because I wasn't
you went
interested.
by yourself?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Rock and roll, man. You got balls.
It was fun because what the other thing too was like I played so much basketball and I was training so much that you don't have time for hobbies and you don't have time to develop any external passions
Yeah.
because you're just exhausted all the time
Yeah.
or broken all the time. So when I went to China, I was like, holy fuck, like this is amazing. And it was just like all my senses were on fire in the most
Culture shock.
positive way.
Yeah.
So I was like, I want to write about this. I want to take pictures. I want to like share what's going on. So my first trip to China, I flew to Hong Kong, which, and then I crossed the border. There is an actual border. And then I went into China and I was like Shenzhen, Guangzhou. And then I went up to like Wuhan. I went to see the Three Gorges Dam. Then I went to Nanjing, which was like the winter capital. And then I went over to Shanghai. Then I went out to Beijing, saw the Great Wall, and then I went out to like Xi'an, Terracotta Warriors. Then I went all the way out to the border of like China and Pakistan, China and Kazakhstan. They've got a beautiful lake out there called Siram Lake. And then from there, I hitchhiked down into Tibet and I like hiked to Mount Everest Base Camp before there was a road. Now there's a road. You can drive there. I did that in 2010 on my motorcycle. That was cool. But yeah, and then I came out and I went to Lhasa, and then I came out through southern China, like Zhongyan, and then they've got a beautiful town called Lijian, Dali, and then kind of back out to Guangzhou, and then back to Hong Kong, and then I flew home, and then
How
when I
long did that take?
3 months,
Oh, wow. Cool.
yeah. So I just did 90 days. It was amazing.
That's
It was life changing. But then when I got home, I was just like, "Whoa, this is fucking boring. Like,
Yeah.
fuck this. I'm going back." So I ended up like going home for Christmas, and then like 2 weeks later, I was back in Shanghai, trying to start a life. So I was like teaching English,
Yeah.
and then I was like in Shanghai trying to take photos, doing some writing, and then a local magazine said, "Hey, do a feature about this." So, I wrote it and shot it. And then I was like, "Would you pay me to do this if I went like to really remote, cool places in China, like to do travel features?" And he's like, "Yeah, go ahead." And he paid me like $500 and I'd like, spend half of it getting out into the middle of nowhere and I would come back. And then after that, I started doing like regional magazines. So I started working for like Hong Kong and Singapore, like English speaking stuff. And then after that, I got into like the New York Times, Time, Newsweek, Forbes, Fortune, and the rest of them. But I never got a National Geographic chance because that was always my goal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I moved to television. I really never looked back.
That's awesome.
China was wild back then, man. It was like something else. But
Yeah,
I,
my economics teacher in high school, this was in like 1998. She had a business, and I think it was like maybe 10 years before. She sold generators or something like that in China, and she went there on a trip. And at that time, the government followed you around from the hotel. You couldn't like do stuff on your own. So it's probably like early 90s, maybe I'm saying, thinking, or maybe late 80s.
Well, Tiananmen changed
And
everything.
they escorted them to the different points of interest and
Mm.
the factories and stuff, and they weren't able to, do anything.
The it was really frustrating when I was working with the New York Times because it was really cat and mouse. Like they were always following us. They would kind of
Yeah.
detain us, arrest us, lock us in our hotel rooms so we couldn't get out to like meet people who weren't happy. And
So if you were there for 18 years?
I was, yes.
Wow, in it was consecutive? You didn't come and live back in the States at all? It was like you'd come back for, like, holidays and things like that, I assume, here and there?
Come back for holidays, but from like 2012 to 2019, like when I left, 2018 when I left, like I was traveling like 250 days a year, like all over the world making the extreme trek shows.
How did it change over that 18 years?
It was life changing for
No, I
me
mean, not for
and
you, but
but
just about the country. How did the country change?
like night and day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think what happened was China opened up, right? 1979, 1980. Deng Xiaoping, the president at the time, like he was like, he's like, let a thousand flowers bloom. Like he's like, we're gonna let the economy go crazy. And then in the 80s, the economy went crazy. And then there was Tiananmen Square where there was a protest, and they're like, well, we have capitalism, let's have democracy too. And they're like, nope, fuck that.
Yeah.
So then
The bags guy or whatever.
the
Tiananmen Square was was that the man holding the grocery bags in front of the tank?
tank,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that happened, and then everything cooled off, and like, in the early '90s, like China was an international pariah, right? Like, but late
Mid
'90s it
90s
picked
was
up again.
when Britain gave Hong Kong back in 1995 or
'97,
okay, 97.
yeah, and then but then by the late '90s things were rocking and rolling again, and then by the time I got there in like 2001, 2002, it was on a rocket ship, and it really was on a rocket ship until like Xi Jinping, the current
Yeah.
president, until he took over. So he took over around like 2016, 2017, and then the country like immediately became very foreign unfriendly. So it was harder to set up businesses, it was harder to get bank accounts, it was harder to do things where you had to work with the government in any way, shape, or form. So it became like a real China first
Yeah.
country. And that was part of his platform that he, ran on. And that was when I like saw the writing on the wall. It was like, it's time to go. Yeah.
I saw um somewhere that new, I don't know if you heard of that deep seek new AI like chat GDP type of thing where somebody wrote in it what happened at Tiananmen Square and it immediately like
Blew up your phone?
it censors it. Yeah. It censors it so it says, I'm sorry. It's like really flashes it for a second and then it goes like, I'm sorry, I cannot answer this question or something. That's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, so you have to understand, like when I first went to China in 2001, 2002, like everything was available. Like you could watch TV in China from the United States, and then as Facebook came out in like 2004, I think you could have Facebook in China, and then YouTube came out, you had YouTube in China, Twitter came out, you had Twitter in China, and then all of a sudden, all these people started using these social media platforms for like dissidents or for attacking the
Yeah.
government, and then they blocked them
It's like
all.
around the time probably when there was some rebelling against kind of the Chinese control of like Hong Kong and like that stuff.
Yeah, that's always been an issue for sure.
My friend went, I think I want to say in 2016, and he went to Beijing and he filmed like raw comedy, like man on the street stuff, where it was like a vulgar redneck and he was doing all this crazy stuff, and like nobody said anything, and it was like the Wild West. But I don't know what it would be like now. I've never been to China, so
Yeah. Well, if you're filming yourself, it's not usually like a big deal.
yeah,
But if you start putting the camera on other people and asking them their opinions about life or the government, then you can get into some real trouble. Yeah. But it was amazing. Like it was great for business and photographing China. Like the real amazing time for me was like 2002 to 2003, all the way up to the Olympics, which was August 2008 in Beijing, the Beijing Olympics, because every single magazine in the world wanted China stories because it was this build up to this great Olympics, and I was a freelancer and I was working every day. And to be a freelancer and to be that busy was incredible. And then Lehman Brothers collapses in September 2008. And then, of course, there was a lot of terrible things that happened.
how did that become the collateral? You said that that kind of like affected what you were doing. How did that become kind of the collateral damage? From that collapse, it affecting obviously newspapers and stuff at the
Print,
time.
print publishing was killed.
What and how did that specifically affect print publishing? Because is it because print publishing was already carrying a little water because the advent of the internet, and it was already not on super stable ground, and then once the banking collapsed, they didn't have the extra money to kind of artificially prop up those losing endeavors? Is that
Absolutely it. Yeah, because because in 2008 or 2007, like the New York Times made a massive amount of ad revenue, or not ad revenue on their classified ads, right? Huge section in the back of the newspaper. Like you want to sell a car, you put an ad in the New York Times, it costs you $250, but you sell the car, right? Because everyone's reading the ads in the New York Times. But then all the ads and classified ads, like, it all went online. And then they started losing massive ad
and then
revenue.
you had to fight for Google and all of these other I mean, that's the tough thing about advertising right now is just that I heard that for films, those big budget movies, whatever the production budget is the advertising budget as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And the reason why is because there's just so many different platforms for that stuff. Like you said, there was print advertisement, and TV stuff, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Now there's so many different mechanisms where they're all competing for your eyeballs.
Yeah. Like I mean, I had long-term clients that I had worked with for 7, 8 years, just tell me, like, they was like, "We can only offer you, like, 1/8 of what we used to pay you, but can you still do this job?" And actually the straw that broke my back was, I was asked by a newspaper in the United States to travel from Shanghai to Chengdu, which is about a 2.5-hour flight, and then there was gonna be a driver that was gonna meet me, and he was gonna drive me about 3 hours out into the countryside to do a portrait of this person that a writer had already been out to do a story about, and then I had to drive 3 hours back and then fly back to Shanghai, and I was like, "That's a pretty long day, like, do you mind if I just stay at the hotel at the airport for one night, fly back the next morning?" And they're like, "We don't have a budget for the airport." And the airport hotel was like $50. And I was like, "Okay, I need to figure out a new fucking job." Because so many of my contemporaries who were photographers of that era, like, they've all kind of drifted into, like, academia and stuff like that, and I never wanted to do that. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, again, intellectual masturbation.
I'm a road warrior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's weird how that we'll see what AI does with all of these things too. It's like now, with photography and writing and filmmaking, it's becoming automated like that.
Well, Peter Thiel, who's a famous investor and one of the yeah, an early investor in Facebook, he was saying the other day that he thinks that AI is gonna completely destroy, people who have been coding their whole lives, because now AI can code faster and more efficiently, and people who are mathematic experts. So he thinks there's gonna be a huge shift in the next 4 or 5 years as AI becomes more prevalent for, people who are writers and storytellers, because he thinks that part of crafting the human spirit and putting that into writing,
Yeah.
is gonna take way longer than just doing simple math calculations.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Hollywood is gonna very quickly implement it, and then they probably already are for easy things like B-roll shots,
Animation?
animation, things that were required kind of a lot of repetitive stuff that were skilled, like rotoscoping, crazy things like that. Um, and I think that they will try to implement it for writing as well as trying to streamline it to produce shows all through AI. But I think it's going to have a very formulaic, predictable um, message to it, and I think that it'll become stale very quickly. But I think that people will try to take shortcuts using it as much as possible. I think for writing now. I think it's a great brainstorming tool
Mhm.
to use it. But if you let it take over, you're just going to get something like everybody else.
Yeah, and I think and then, of course, like, it's gonna be a race to the bottom, and it's just gonna nothing's gonna stand out. It's all gonna kinda look the same, feel the same, sound the same.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've used it with I used to some of the motion graphics commercials that I would do that were the lower budget things that just required like a voiceover with kind of stock photography. I would go to stock sites and I would find if it was like an ad for somebody that had been injured from some drug or something like that. I'd find somebody on a hospital bed that looks hunched over that's specific to this demographic or what.
Yeah.
And then I'd have to search through massive libraries, but I've been using it to create the images, but it doesn't create exactly what I want. So I have to use Photoshop, and it requires more energy and work than it would be if I found a B-roll shot that I just got a stock image from. It's like considerably amount of more work, but I'm getting the results exactly the way I want after I modify it in Photoshop, composite it, add motion to it, and program in what I want. So it's interesting. It's not removing jobs as far as I know at this point. I think it's just giving people more of a vision for exactly what they want to accomplish.
Yeah, I think the big thing in the next couple of years is probably going to be people who know how to use AI assisted technology to do their jobs faster and more. Because I think like Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, he was saying the other day, like he envisions like within 5 years, people are probably going to be working like 3 days a week because AI is going to automate so much of the jobs. And that can be good or bad, and universal income, and or whether it's just going to be massive employment, we don't know yet. But people are going to be working way less because they'll be able to do their jobs basically faster.
I could imagine like being in college right now because you have to write so many. I had to write so many papers in college. There must be like rampant. Like I don't know if I'd send my kids to college right now. I think that I think it will become like that movie Wally, where everybody's on rascals and they're hundreds of pounds overweight and they're drinking their food in like containers because I think it'll definitely make people lazy. It's like kind of using like spell check for everything. If you learn from your mistakes, you don't learn from your victories, apparently.
That's true.
Probably that can attest to. So that'll be interesting. I heard a thing a long time ago with the director David Fincher, who did, The Social Network and Gone Girl, Seven, a bunch of movies.
Seven is the best. Oh, he did Fight Club.
Yeah, Fight Club. I can't miss Fight Club. And he said that as technology becomes more, I'm kind of paraphrasing. And this was years ago. He was saying that if as technology becomes more kind of streamlined and consolidated, it allows the artist or the author to more effectively get exactly what he wants. But what it'll do is there'll be a huge separation between the value of the person's vision from one person to the next. So it'll really be cut and dry, the difference between a director, because you'll see this unified vision because they're able to more effectively get exactly what they want because of technology. I think it was Alfred Hitchcock or something that said that if he could get 10% of what he originally had visioned, it would be a great movie. And he methodically never looked through the camera and storyboarded out every single frame. Cinematographer knew exactly what he wanted, and he still felt like he couldn't get every minute detail down. So I think it'll allow that to happen. But
What a cocky bastard, huh? If I can just get 10% of what I need, it's still going to be great
he was notoriously
and amazing.
Yeah.
Did you ever see that shot for shot remake they did of Psycho with Vince Vaughn, like, and way back in the day?
Maybe.
That's like 15 years ago,
I think
maybe.
it was weird. I don't know if I watched the whole thing or not. I forget. I'll have to kind of revisit it. It's always weird when an actor that you're known for in a very specific genre, I mean, like he was specifically doing comedies.
Old school.
Swingers and old school.
Swingers.
Yeah, Swingers. I just watched Swinger, John Favreau. That's a great movie. But yeah, I think it was just weird for me to watch. I remember when I watched 24-Hour Photo when I was in high school in the movie theater, and Robin Williams was in it, and I was like, what the fuck is this? I hate this movie.
Yeah.
And then going back later, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like really a genius film. I think his name is Mark Romantic. He's a big commercial director. He directs a lot of big commercials. But I think it was hard for me in the initial viewing to get past the casting and see him play a different person. So I'll have to.
Why is Mork playing a dramatic role? But then he goes into Good Will Hunting and kills it. Yeah. It's interesting. I was listening to what's his face? Oh my God. The Ben Affleck and his co-writer, super famous guy.
Matt Damon.
There we go. Yeah, Matt Damon was saying the other day that, or he was saying like movies like Good Will Hunting could never be made anymore
Yeah.
because because the DVD business doesn't exist anymore. So he's like, you could get a budget for a movie that was like twice what you thought you would get at the box office, because 3 to 6 months after the box office release, the film would have a second release on DVD.
Yeah.
And he's like, sometimes the DVD release could be bigger than the box office release, but no one talked about it. But
Oh, yeah.
but that was real money that came in. So he's like, if you know you're only going to make 30 million at the box office, you could still do a $50 million movie because you knew the DVDs were going to come back. And he goes, that's kind of how Good Will Hunting came about.
Yeah.
And he goes now the DVD business is gone and the streamers don't pay. So you're stuck on that budget. And he goes, it's in like, you're either making movies that are $250 million or you're making movies that are like $5 million, and there's like nothing in between.
Oh yeah. They're huge budget. There was, I think, the era of like American like indies, cinema, not including like the 70s, like new wave and stuff, was like the mid 90s to mid 2000s because of that.
Yeah.
I have friends that were producers that have a bunch of credits in films that were $3 to $5 million movies, and now they're like accountants, like, and bookkeepers.
Mhm.
They had, the way it was traditionally financed, from my understanding, I never did this myself, is that they would sell off all of the DVD rights to different countries. So you'd be like, if the movie's $5 million, you get X amount of money in advance from Germany and Italy and all of these different places. And usually you can make up about 70% of the budget just based on selling the foreign rights in advance. And then you just have to get the gap financing for the other 30%. And if you have, A-list actors or even high B-list actors attached, you could get that gap financing. And sometimes sometimes you would get tax credits. You'd shoot in another state. Sometimes you get rebates. And so it was a lot easier to raise money probably as an independent filmmaker, I assume, at that time. That's
Yeah.
not an excuse on why I haven't done it. I hold that on my own,
No,
but that's what I heard at least.
it's definitely a tougher landscape at the moment, I think. Yeah. Like
At the same time, I mean, I could make a movie for, probably $100,000 and it would be great. So I don't really have excuses. I made a film. I shot a 38-page script, a comedy, like an action comedy, in 4 days with three 4K cameras, like 5 or 6 years ago. 38 pages in 4 days.
That's amazing.
On $7,000.
Yeah.
And it looks like great for what it is. So
Mhm.
I just need to get my ass out of the chair and actually do it and stop making excuses like most writers and directors and artists, for that matter.
It's great that you have like all the skills that where you can actually make your own film. Like so many people, like they know how to use a camera, but they don't know how to write or edit. And it's nice to see again a jack of all trades who can come up with a concept, shoot it, and put something out into the world,
Yeah.
without having to rely on 100 people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that's being in the industry for nearly 2 decades, for God's sakes.
I got a funny one for you. Want to hear this? So I was doing this episode of the Nomad. And again, we shot it during COVID. So we're putting it all together when I was in lockdown in Istanbul.
And this was in Turkey, the episode then, or that you made, or?
So we got out of Turkey and we got into Europe, and then we went up to Heidelberg, Germany, which is this beautiful little town in kind of southern Germany.
Was that the Mark Twain guy?
Yeah.
Okay, I watched a little bit of it, but I didn't see the whole thing. So.
It was fun. But so again, like we got some money, we're putting the whole thing together. I've got my crew. And then, 2 of my guys can't get out of their countries. Like one guy tested for COVID, another guy, was having difficulties. And I was like, well, we got to keep going. So I knew how to shoot. And then I was directing the episode. I had produced the whole episode. And then I was the host. So it was me and my director of photography. That's it. Just the 2 of us. And we shot the whole 46-minute episode ourselves.
That's awesome, man. Good for you.
It took us...
the quality looks great. I mean, I think you still deserve all the credit, but I think when you do indie stuff, you realize that writing or filming to a location is very, very beneficial. And if you have a location that has, good lighting naturally already, where you don't have to bring in a bunch of lighting, or it is very visually appealing, a lot of people often overlook the simplicity of that decision, but that's really, really key, I think.
It is, and the problem now is, this is what I'm fighting with, is the travel genre has disappeared.
Yeah.
Like, so Bourdain passed away in
Why
2016.
do you think that is? Just because of COVID and stuff? Or?
Well, no, I think Bourdain had probably the greatest television travel career of anyone ever, right? So he had No Reservations, which was on Travel Channel. They did like 150 episodes, and then he did Parts Unknown with CNN. They did 8 or 9 episodes, and then he passed away. And no one has picked up that mantle, and no one is greenlighting anything similar. Like, so they've got all these celebrities or movie stars who are traveling around Italy or going down to Mexico and doing all these things, but they don't have a gritty fucking tough ass former heroin addict, badass chef who's just going out there and laying it down as truth.
Yeah.
And that's what made him, that's what made everyone love
We
him.
would just go to break down the barriers and just meet with anybody and sit down anywhere. That's always the way that I've liked to travel. I mean, you have certain friends that are, gonna walk down those back alleys and talk to strangers and go to little hole in the walls. And then you have the ones that want to stay at the Marriott and, sleep until noon and maybe hit the pool in the afternoon. And
Exactly. But I mean, I've had television executives tell me that like the whole travel genre is now on YouTube and it's no longer considered premium content. So it's like, okay, so now what, like, you're 40 something, you got to set up a YouTube channel?
yeah, I mean, I don't see how that. I mean, I loved that show. It's escapism. It allows you to see a side of something that you don't usually get to see. And if you can't do that, since I have now, I did a extensive amount of traveling up, and I never went to China, but I did a lot of traveling up until I had my daughter, and then now with 2 kids, it's a little tough. And my son now just turned 4, and when he gets a little bit older, maybe in a year or 2, we'll start doing some more traveling. But me and my wife were together for like 15 years before we had my daughter, so we were able to, go everywhere and see a lot of things.
Yeah, Bourdain was an inspiration. Yeah, because there's no one out there I don't think, like, I don't trust celebrities. Like, they just say what they have to say to get work, right? Like, but he didn't give a fuck, and there's no one out there who doesn't give a fuck anymore.
Well, you could tell that it didn't feel scripted. It was raw.
Mm-hmm.
And you could feel that he genuinely like loved doing it.
Mm.
He didn't feel uncomfortable about it. He felt like he fit right in.
Yeah, everywhere.
Part of it was the drinking, probably, but
Yeah, we got to keep it flowing.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I've done like entire podcasts about Bourdain and like what he meant to me or what he meant to some of the other people who are in the industry and stuff like that. And we talk about it. It's like no one has picked up the mantle. No one's ready to greenlight something that is similar.
that seems like total bullshit to me. Like, I don't know if it's the same anymore, but Netflix used to spend roughly, like, I think on a series show of like 50 minutes or something, like an episodic show. Like, I think $6 million was like the average. Like, that was pretty much the price. It might be more now. This was years ago.
I'll
But
do a lot with that.
I mean, you could do it. I mean, I don't even, Parts Unknown probably cost practically nothing compared to that. I mean,
I think they were running at about $350 an episode.
that's like peanuts. And for a streamer that spends, billions and billions of dollars a year on producing new content, you would think that, they're doing Korean and African television shows and stuff. You'd think that something like that maybe we need to pitch them something.
Maybe we do. I don't know. I just think like no one's willing to take a bet on someone who's kind of unknown, and I think that's what it takes, right? That's what it takes to find someone real and authentic and not just shiny and overproduced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a silent auction at my gym. I never go to the gym, as you can tell. I haven't been in about a year, but I just started going back like a week ago, the LA Fitness, and they have a cool framed photo, a black and white one of Bourdain that is signed, a silent auction photo. And it looks so cool, that high contrast, high key, black and white photography. And
Nice.
yeah,
Yeah,
to see more of that.
absolutely. No, he was an absolute legend. Well, look, you feeling good? Anything else you want to talk about?
I'm open to whatever you want to.
Well, I wish you the best of luck with your scripts and stuff like that.
Thanks, man.
And yeah, I mean, if, when you get a project off the ground, you want to come back and talk about it, we should do it for sure. Because I'd love to, I'd love to break down like the anatomy of getting a script sold and then how to actually bring it to an audience. Like that whole journey would be fantastic to hear, especially from you.
Yeah. I'm right now, one of the projects that, a script that I really like that I really want to do, is kind of an out there idea. And so what I'm doing is I'm creating a deck for it, and I'm using AI to create storyboards with a character that is like an A-list actor they kind of look similar. Like I created an AI kind of version of the actor that I would like to kind of cast in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm replicating that person in different storyboards, like different like key scenes throughout the story, like things that happen, and creating a deck using that. It's like very cumbersome, but it's cool because a lot of times like an executive or somebody might have trouble visualizing the artistic choices that you're thinking about when they're reading a script. So it kind of removes that barrier. And that's kind of a fun new thing that I haven't done before, but it's very time intensive.
Do you think like AI storyboarding is going to help like people move more scripts? Like, do you think that's going to be like a thing that every writer is going to have to figure out?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think that the more content that you can always give them, the better. The more that you have that breaks down that barrier. I mean, Hollywood is really I mean, we're selling entertainment. People don't need to live off of this. They need, electricity and energy to survive. They need food to survive, but jobs, but entertainment is a tough sell. I mean, it's a very disposable thing. And so Hollywood is not really in the position of taking risks. So anything that you can break down the risks and help them kind of see the finished results a little bit more is really beneficial. And that's what's great about your, travel shows. You really, see it. I mean, it's ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. We're looking at doing a few episodes of the Nomad in the United States this year. So we're going to be, because I only did them in Europe at the time because we were in Europe and we couldn't travel. But now, putting them out on YouTube, it's been getting some good feedback and stuff like
How
that.
long are I think the episode I watched was like, maybe, was it 40 minutes or something?
46, yeah.
Okay, 46.
Yeah.
Does it cross cut between like multiple storylines within it at all ever, or?
Yeah, we're cutting back and forth between different storylines. We're I might be with a Michelin chef here, and then I go visit his friend, and then I visit another friend.
Pick up that original story.
Yeah,
Cool. That's good because it keeps the flow moving. I saw the one in Malta where the guy was doing the reeds and stuff. That's really cool. The lost art form of creating that flute or.
yeah. Malta is amazing. Like the history of Malta is spectacular. I don't know if you know, but Ridley Scott films almost exclusively in like Morocco and Malta. Yeah, especially Gladiator and stuff like that, because they have all these like historical coliseums and like places like that, and he builds there and uses all that architecture, and he's in Malta all the time filming. So it's a really nice backdrop.
A lot of the drone shots make it look like it's not like overly populated, so you can get away with using a lot of those locations. I haven't been to Malta. I've done a lot of traveling in Italy, and then I've been to Croatia, but I've never been there. So.
Croatia's amazing. So in February, I'm going to drop my episode of The Nomad from Dubrovnik, Croatia.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, we filmed there. So normally Dubrovnik, for anyone who knows, Dubrovnik is overwhelmed to capacity with cruise ships in the summertime. So Mediterranean cruises, they come in, they get the whole Game of Thrones tour because that's King's Landing, right? So everyone comes in and there's millions of people like a day visiting Dubrovnik. But we went and filmed during COVID and it was empty. So we had the whole city to ourselves. We had like Michelin star chefs and bartenders and all these people. And like they gave us all the time in the world because there was no one there. It was amazing.
I have to go back and go there. When I went to Croatia with my wife, we flew into Split, and then we rented a sailboat with some friends, and we sailed around all the islands for a week. So we went obviously to Hvar, but we went to a bunch of little islands, and they have like old castles and ruins and really cool, neat stuff like that. So, but we didn't go to Dubrovnik, so we'll have to check that out.
Get a little farther down south. Yeah.
Are they on the Euro now, or?
So So yeah, Croatia officially became a member of the Schengen visa zone, which is that European Union zone, and I think they are using euros. But now, so Croatia used to be a great place because as a Canadian and an American, you can only stay for 3 months in mainland Europe, and then you have to leave, and then you can come back for 3 more months after you've been out for 3 months. And Croatia was a great place to like go and hang out while you were waiting to go back into Europe. If because when you're filming and stuff like that, like you don't have visas to stay in places for years. Maybe in the UK or something like that if you're working on a big budget thing. But so you go in, you film a little there, then you come out, go somewhere else, and then you come back a couple months later, film again. So you're always using these like little visa on arrival tricks.
The famous movie director Orson Welles that did Citizen Kane, he lived in Croatia for a while. I think he married a Croatian woman. I forget what city he lived in, but towards the end of his career, he was in there. After our cruise, or after with the sailboat, we had a captain and a skipper, whatever. And after that, we took a boat, like a ferry from Split back over to Italy, and then we went to Italy for a week.
Nice.
I forget where it dropped us off, kind of like south of Florence.
Yeah, Italy's lovely too. Yeah. No, Croatia's lovely. Like when I was filming there, it was a good vibe, and I like Croatia because like the people, they don't live to work, they work to live. So 4 in the afternoon, 5 in the afternoon, everyone's having a couple glass of wine, loving life. They're eating dinner late and staying up late. And it's a really really fun place to be.
And it was really affordable when we went. I mean, we went like, gosh, like 11 years ago or something like that. So it was really cheap when we went. I don't remember the food being very good or the wine. If you got Croatian wine, am I wrong? Or
So Croatian wine is amazing for one reason and one reason only. They don't put any additives or preservatives in it.
awesome.
Yeah, so you can drink a ton of it and there's no hangover.
Maybe it wasn't the wine, but I remember the food was a little bit bland. But compared to Italian food, which is very heavy, and you want to go into a coma after you eat it.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know how it stacks up to Italian food, which is high up on everyone's list. But no, I'll send you the link to the Dubrovnik episode as well, so you can check that out. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, traveling the world is the best. Got to be coming back soon.
Yeah, you'd have to go. Yeah, I mean, like the last major trip I went on was we went to Japan. My wife is half Japanese, and her mom is from Japan, and her grandmother lives out there and stuff. And so we went to Japan for a month when my daughter was like 1 year old.
Mm-hmm.
Took the 12.5-hour flight to Osaka.
That's got to be tough.
My daughter was good for the whole time until the last hour. She was crying. And I know my son will cry with 10 minutes into it. It'll start creating problems. So
It's tough flying with kids, huh? Yeah. But more travel coming soon, hopefully.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, look, we can go up here to the fourth camera, and we can see that we're in the same room.
Cool.
Yeah, and we can check it out, man. It's really good to meet you.
It was nice to meet you too, man.
Thank you so much for coming.
in touch.
Let's do it.
We'll grab a beer one of these days or something. And then like I said, when I have some more information on some of the projects that I'm working on, and I've wheeled and dealed and made some deals, I'll come back in here and tell you all about it.
Absolutely. Thanks for swinging by.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And we fade to black. And we're out.